Hey, English 104 students, I'm here with a quick video to walk us through the three I's, but using a metaphor called the quote sandwich. If you've been in an English 103 class previous to this, or one of my English 103 classes, or you've been to the Writing Center, you've probably heard about the quote sandwich. Now, backtracking to a previous video, as well as to a previous document, which I'll pull up here in a moment, are the three I's, right? The three I's are directly connected to the quote sandwich. So when we're doing an introduction to a quote or we're introducing it, you're using the ACTs, right? You're giving the context that someone would need to understand for a particular quote. That directly connects to the top bun of a sandwich or the top piece of bread of a sandwich. Then you've got the middle part, which is the integration, and that's where you take original an actual quote or source information from another text and you put it into your paper. You do so with a signal phrase generally, and that's called integration. The integration is really the meat of the sandwich. It's where all the information is really being packed in. We need a good middle part to a sandwich in order for it to hold up. Then we've got the interpretation. The interpretation is largely connected to that bottom bun of a sandwich. And we think about that as largely giving the reader what they need to know in order to better understand that quote after having read it. So you're then taking the quote and you're putting it into your own words. So the quote sandwich helps you understand that, hopefully using a metaphor instead of the three I's. Top bun means you have to make sure that the reader understands what's going to be in the middle, right? So we eat with our eyes first, then we actually eat the meat, and then by the very end of it, we've got to understand what that quote is all about, meaning we've got to be able to pick up that whole sandwich. And so when we pick up a sandwich, right, we grip it by the bottom bun and we grip it by the top bun, and then we're looking at what's in the middle. So that's essentially what we're doing with the three I's and the quote sandwich together. So if I share my screen with you here and I go back to a PDF that we've looked at before, you'll remember this is the three I's PDF. And so introduce, integrate, and interpret, equating to the top bun right here for introduce, the meat for the integrate, and then the bottom bun is the interpret. So when we're looking at how we would do this type of thing, you'll notice that we have some particular examples within this document here. So the interpretation of a quote, or the top bun of a quote, is largely giving the information that someone would need to know before you actually give a quote or pieces of information from a text. When you do so, you want to give background information from that essay you're taking something from. Now, the integration is where you use that signal phrase. Now, you'll notice we've got two examples, and one is a revised version, and it also has an in-text citation. Now, sometimes I'll get questions about why this in-text citation doesn't have the author's last name. Well, it's because the author's last name is mentioned up here in a sentence previous to that. So we automatically know that this quote, because it's saying he asserts, the he is up here to McDonald. Okay. Or is it McDonald's? Let's see here. Yeah, McDonald's. And helps us understand a little bit more about who is actually saying this. So in the in-text citation, we could just include the page number because we have the author's last name used previous to it. You'll see another one here. Each one of these has page numbers. Now, the big question becomes is what happens if you don't have page numbers? Say, for instance, you're using an electronic document. In that case, you don't use the page numbers. You just give us an in-text citation with the author's last name. So that's how we integrate those together. Now, one thing to note is when we quote something, we have to know what we're quoting and why we're quoting. So it's judging how much to quote. Generally, you only want to quote when the wording coming from a text is better than the wording you can produce. That's when you would use direct wording. Regardless, because you're taking ideas from another source, you would want to be able to give an in-text citation for that so we know that it's not your idea. And so at the third page of this document, it gives you when you need quotations and when you don't need quotations, and knowing how much to quote. Generally, for this paper, you're only going to be using at most one block quote. And block quotes are a little different. I'd say avoid them. So if ever you get to the point where you feel where you are going 4 lines of a text or more, meaning you're writing it into your paper and expands over 4 lines, then you need to shrink that quote down. Okay, that's one way that we have to be able to understand using too many people's words is a bad thing in this case, because we may be able to paraphrase part of that. Okay, now the last part of the quote sandwich is that bottom bun, and I actually consider the meat and the bottom bun to perhaps be the most important part of the quote sandwich. And that's largely because if you have a quote sandwich and you go to pick up, right, a sandwich and the bottom bun is really thin, or it doesn't seem to hold up against the sandwich, the whole thing falls apart. So you need a strong bottom bun where you're unpacking things, where you are taking a quote and you're putting it into your own words. You're helping the reader understand what they need to understand, what they need to get from the quote that you gave or from this source information that you provided for us. Okay, so take a look at this 3 Eyes document a little closer. Make sure that you understand the quoting, make sure that you understand the in-text citations, and ultimately remember that when I'm talking about the 3 Eyes, or when you're referencing the 3 Eyes, you're dealing with the quote sandwich. All right, so hopefully you find this helpful. Please email me if you have any questions, of course. And other than that, stay brilliant, guys.